Hy- Hyponatremia. It's an important topic, and it's also important from your university point of view, from your exams point of view, as well as from your clinical practice. And I hope all of you have joined. I know it has been this 6 months have been very trying. Still combating the this pandemic of corona, and this online class. It's not been easy for any of us. But anyway, I think this will go for a little long period. So without losing any more time, let's switch on to our topic. Our topic for today is hyponatremia. So hyponatremia, as it sounds, it is always defined as a serum sodium level below 135 millimole per liter. It is a very prevalent condition. It's one of the most commonly utilized disorder, and it affects 15 to 30% of the hospitalized patients, and even 7% of the ambulatory patients. And it can the burden of hospitalization due to hyponatremia is immense, as you can see, and there are higher incidences in chronic diseases like cirrhosis and heart failure, even CKDs, and especially in the geriatric populations, it has a very high incidence. And even the hospital acquired hyponatremia is also very common, can be surgery induced or a drug induced. So first of all, most importantly, we should know about the sodium balance. Going back to your physiology classes, you know the hyponatremia, it will result from the inability of the kidney to excrete a water load or excess water intake. And then the water intake will depend on the thirst mechanism. As you remember from your physiology classes, the thirst is stimulated by increase in plasma osmolality, and this is sensed by the osmoreceptors, as we read in our endocrinology, where the osmoreceptors, which are located in the basolateral aspect of the hypothalamus, and it will lead to release of ADH hormone from the posterior pituitary. This is the most important thing you have to remember. ADH, or vasopressin hormone. This is the one that most commonly responsible for around 60% of the cases of hyponatremia in totality, and it is involved in one or the other mechanism. So this antidiuretic hormone will act on the receptors, or this is V2 receptors of which are located at the basolateral aspect of the collecting duct cells. You remember the collecting duct cells, as that's an extension of the renal tubules, and this will lead to increased aquaporin expression on the luminal aspect of the collecting ducts, and this increases water absorption and abolishes thirst. So you remember from your this physiology days, when the renal tubules or the collecting ducts, which is the later part of the tubules, and which is mainly responsible for the majority of the water absorptions, and this is how the osmoreceptors are trigger when there is either decrease in intravascular deficit, or because of the thirst mechanism being stimulated, and the release of ADH, which in try to compensate for the intravascular depletion or increase in osmolality. And through these mechanism, the body tries to maintain the serum osmolality or the homeostasis. So again, very important to remember, you should always remember the most of the fluid or the measurement of serum sodium is in the extracellular compartment. So as you remember from your physiology, there is an intracellular compartment and there is an extracellular compartment. The extracellular compartment, the intracellular comprises most of the 2/3 of the water capacity of the body, and the extracellular is responsible for the other 1/3. And these 1/3 of the extravascular the extracellular compartment is again composed of interstitium and vessels, or intravascular. One thing that dictum is hyponatremia occurs if there is a persistent ADH stimulation, and that can be seen in the following conditions. Either there can be because of the in volume depletion, or because of the effect of decreased volume, and that contracts the effect of osmolality, and this ADH stimulation continues to occur. And this effective arterial blood volume, which is responsible for this persistent ADH secretion, it can occur by two mechanisms. Either it will be a true volume depletion or abnormal ADH secretions. A true volume depletion will take place, and especially either it will be in an edematous patient with heart failure or cirrhosis, or there is a low cardiac output, or there can be in cases of diarrhea or GIT, where you will have low intravascular volume, and there will be as there will be reduction in tissue perfusion, and that will be sensed by the baroreceptors. And these baroreceptors, there are three sites: carotid sinus or aortic arch, and the glomerular afferent arterioles, which again regulate through the activity of the RAS system, and the atrio and ventricles. Then they have a special tendency to regulate the release of natriuretic peptides, which also which can when stretched, which can lead to the excretion of excess water and sodium. And then you have an abnormal ADH secretion, that is syndrome of one of those types is syndrome of inappropriate ADH release, which is also known as SIADH. So this is the basic mechanism how the hyponatremia takes place in the body. Now, while defining hyponatremia, you can start off. This is a very simple algorithm. Either you will have low serum osmolality, and when they have a low serum osmolality, which is hypotonic, this is basically true hyponatremia, because this is the genuine hyponatremia. When you have intravascular deficit or excess ADH release or several other reasons where the serum osmolality decrease and the osmoreceptor threshold is also relaxed. So this is true hyponatremia. Then once with the normal serum osmolarity, and still if you can have this is one of a type of pseudo hyponatremia, where there can be hyperlipidemia or hyperproteinemia, as in case of multiple myelomas, where the sodium levels are misappropriately diagnosed to be low. So this is which is called as a pseudo hyponatremia condition, which is a normal serum osmolarity, and still you will find while measuring the lab values will give us a low serum sodium level. Then there is one particular condition which is called hyper serum osmolarity, which is in a hypertonic solution, or hypotonic serum osmolarity, where the normal, the normal serum osmolarity is 285 to 295, and it stays around there. But when there is a high serum osmolality, that can be due to hyperglycemia or mannitol induced hypertonic serum, and that can lead to reading of low sodium level, and that is because for every 100 gram increase of blood sugar or plasma blood sugar, there will be 1.6 milliequivalent decrease in serum sodium, and that is a normal response of the body, as or in cases of mannitol or any hyperosmolar solution, you can have a lower sodium level, which is manifested because this high because of the high serum osmolality, the plasma tends to withdraw water along with the hypertonic solution. So whenever there a normal, there's a very normal fundamental of frank or very normal physiological phenomena, where either you have a lower serum protein or a higher serum protein, or the lower hydrostatic pressure or a higher hydrostatic pressure, or lower colloid pressure or higher colloid pressure. So everything depends on these pressure inside the serum plasma, and that also depends on the osmolarity of the serum. So the osmotic and the hydrostatic forces are the two forces which basically acts as far as serum osmolarity is concerned. And when the true hyponatremia is there, when talking about the true hyponatremia, then you have to have a normal normotonic serum, and there you have to assess for the volume, and the volume is assessed, either it can be hypovolemia or a euvolemia or hypervolemia. So we have come to a graph where you have there is no issue with the pseudo hyponatremia, though no issue with the hyperosmolar serum. So where you have a normo-osmolar, but you will have a volume status if you have to assess the volume status, and if there is a hypovolemic hyponatremia, then the causes can be GIT causes or renal causes, and it can be either be even diuretic induced or cerebral salt wasting or mineral corticoid deficiency or salt losing nephropathy or renal tubular acidosis. Then again you have to measure the urine sodium, and if the urine sodium is more than 20, so basically hypovolemia is where intravascular deficit is there. Once the intravascular deficit is there, and it can be, then again you have to map it into two categories, either urine sodium more than 20 or urine sodium less than 20. So very simple fundamentals is that when there is a gastroenteritis or third space loss as in burns or in pancreatitis, so since there is intravascular deficit and there is it will lead to stimulation of ADH and RAS pathway, and they will try to absorb as much sodium and water which are available in the urinary tubules. Since the diarrhea or the third space loss will lead to loss of water as well as sodium, so in order as a compensatory phenomena, the body will try to extract sodium out of the urine, and so the urine sodium will be less than 20. But in cases of hypovolemia plus certain conditions like mineral corticoid deficiency, when there is a decrease in aldosterone or salt losing nephropathy or any renal tubular acidosis where the renal tubules are dysfunctional and they are not able to absorb the proper amount of sodium, or there is a diuretics, especially thiazide diuretics, which acts on the sodium chloride channel, and it or a particular condition which is called cerebral salt wasting. And the cerebral salt wasting is one of the phenomena. This is seen in neurosurgery cases or subarachnoid hemorrhage, especially it is associated with the subarachnoid hemorrhage, where again you will have increase in urine sodium rather than decrease in urine sodium along with the hypovolemia, and this is the one of the reason for the hyponatremia, one of the very common reason for the hyponatremia. And the reason behind the cerebral salt wasting is proposed to be because of inappropriate stimulation of BNP, that is a brain natriuretic peptide, and these brain natriuretic peptides basically causes more excretion of sodium, urine sodium and water. So this is all about hypovolemia. This is the whole picture about hypovolemia. Then euvolemic is when urine, again it is categorized between the urine sodium more than 20 or urine sodium less than 20. Basically, in cases of especially SIADH, which is very common, is responsible for 60% of the cases of hyponatremia. You will have normovolemic or the normovolemic plasma, but you will have urine sodium which will be more than 20, because there is an inappropriate stimulation of antidiuretic hormone, and this antidiuretic hormone will lead to absorption of more water and through the collecting ducts, which is the normal pathway, and there will be a relatively more of water absorption than the sodium absorption, and that will lead to normovolemic hyponatremia. But since there is an excess of water absorption, we still are perplexed why don't we have edema in cases of SCIDH. We'll talk about it in the later slides. Because of certain compensatory mechanism, as we talk about, as we saw in the previous section, we talked about the stretch receptors and how they are these all atria and ventricles, and these all try to compensate for the any volume depletion or any hyperperfusion. So what happens? So that is the reason. This is a very particular condition. Then the other is a glucocorticoid deficiency. Then again, it has proposed to lead to inappropriate antidiuretic hormone action. Then hypothyroidism, it has been proposed to again due to low cardiac output or low intravascular volume. But if you go by Harrison, the reason behind the hypothyroidism, hyponatremia in cases of hypothyroidism is still it's still idiopathic. It's not still been well addressed. Then you can have drug induced, especially some antipsychotic drugs or anti-epileptic drugs. They can also lead to SIDH, like lithium or carbamazepine, and even SSRIs. They are also responsible for hyponatremia. Then under the euvolemia, you have certain conditions where the urine sodium is less than 20, but the patient have a normal volemic serum, where you will have in conditions of primary polydipsia, which is a psychogenic condition where the person tends to take a lot of water. There's a lot of water intake, which is psychogenic, where actually the proposed theory is that the thirst receptor has been reset at the lower level than the where the osmoreceptors are basically being stimulated. So this is a psychogenic polydipsia, and it's one of the reasons for the normovolemic hyponatremia with urine sodium less than 20. Then the beer proteinemia, the people who takes a lot of beer, especially in the Western world, and with not proper nutrition, and they are again they are one of the cause for the normovolemic hyponatremia with urine sodium less than 20, and then can be exercise induced. Then talking about the hypervolemic, especially in cirrhosis, CHF, liver cirrhosis, or even nephrotic syndrome, there is a hyperproteinemia. The osmotic pressure of the plasma is less, and in these conditions the urine sodium will always be less than 20, because the body will try to compensate because it's already hypervolemic, the plasma is already hypervolemic. So the urine sodium will usually be less than 20, and there will be hypoalbuminemia. The causes can be increase in hydrostatic pressure, or can be decrease in on-contact pressure of the vessels because of cirrhosis or nephrotic syndrome, and the urine sodium will always be less than 20. But the other cases is the renal failure. While in renal failure, since the renal tubule dysfunction, the urine sodium, there will be inappropriate. The absorption of the urine sodium won't be up to the mark, and so the urine sodium will be more than 20, while there will still be hypervolemia present. Just a minute. Hello. ठीक है, मैं क्लास ले रहा हूँ, कॉल बैक करता हूँ. So then talking about the hypovolemic hyponatremia, as we talked about, there will be a true deficiency of both sodium and water, and increase in circulating AVP level as the volume is less, and there will be accompanied by free water intake or GI loss, or there can be insensible loss, or there can be primary adrenal insufficiency, or certain salt losing nephropathy, and thiazide diuretics. And urine sodium greater than 20, we talked about the renal losses or the diuretic excess, mineralocorticoid deficiency, which is also in a form of additions deficiency, and salt losing deficiency, or ketonuria, or osmotic diuresis, or cerebral salt wasting syndrome. These all have urine sodium greater than 20, because the sodium is lost through the urine. While in cases of extrarenal losses like vomiting, diarrhea, third space fluid, or burns, pancreatitis trauma, you will have urine sodium greater than 20. So this is all hypovolemic hyponatremia. In the hypervolemic, we talked about there will be proportionally greater increase in total body water, and there will be pitting edema because there is a hypervolemia and the volume load is more, so there will be a pitting edema and all the features of cardiac failure, or then the JVP raised, or ascites will be there, or there will be fluid collection in the extracellular compartment and in the interstitial spaces. And again, when you in cases of hypervolemic hyponatremia, if you see the urine sodium greater than 20, it has to be anything related to the renal pathology, because the compensatory action for the hypervolemia will always be imbibition of sodium from the urine, and urine sodium should be less than 20, as in cases of nephrotic cirrhosis and cardiac failure. So euvolemic hyponatremia, we talked about. This is one of the very important thing to remember, because this is a very common one of the very common clinical scenario, which is a syndrome of inappropriate antidiuresis, where euvolemic hyponatremia is very common. And the other thing is a secondary adrenal insufficiency, or moderate to severe hypothyroidism. So again, in cases of euvolemia, where you will have urinary sodium greater than 20 in cases of glucocorticoid deficiency or hypothyroidism, stress drugs, or SIADH, and in low solute intake or hyponatremia like alcoholics or extreme vegetable dietarians. And then we're talking about the pseudo hyponatremia, just to mention the cases of hypertriglyceridemia and hyperproteinemia, where you have expansion of extracellular fluid with isotonic fluids that do not contain sodium. So here also there will be no transcellular shift of water, but the sodium level will decrease. So talking about the SIDH, it's a defect in the osmoregulation, which is due to inappropriate stimulation of the vasopressin. And you remember from your endocrinology class, the vasopressin is basically responsible for urinary concentration. And the most common, then this is the most common cause for euvolemic hyponatremia. Excuse me. Excess vasopressin can lead to can be due to CNS disturbances like hemorrhage, tumors, infection, trauma, or even ectopic vasopressin secretion. There are different types of SIDH. I think there are around 4 types of SIDH, but this is beyond the scope of your knowledge. So let's not talk about all the types of SIDH. But the ectopic vasopressin is where the small cell cancers or cancer of the duodenum or pancreas, there is basically an ectopic secretion of the vasopressin. And then there is something called idiopathic, which is seen in elderly and is present in up to 10% of the cases. Then the criteria for again SIDH is basically where you have any surgery done on the CNS, so there is an intravascular hemorrhage, or there is an sign of any or any symptoms of exotic vasopressin secretion. So the clinically criteria you will consider, there will be the effective osmolality of the extracellular fluid will be decreased, and there will be inappropriate urinary concentration, since the sodium is being excreted through the urine. So for the level of plasma hyposmolality, the urinary concentration will be higher, and will be clinically it will be euvolemia, hyposmolar euvolemia, and elevated sodium excretion while the patient is on normal salt and water intake. And if there is an exclusion of other potential causes of euvolemic hyposmolality, and there should be a normal renal function and absence of diuretic use. So the supporting diagnostic criteria for SIDH is serum uric acid. So the blood uric acid or serum uric acid should be less than 4 milligram, and urea nitrogen less than 10, fraction excretion of sodium more than 1%, and failure to improve or worsening of hyponatremia after 0.9% saline infusion, and improvement of hyponatremia with fluid restriction. So this all forms a very important part for the diagnostic criteria for SIDH, since we know it is inappropriate stimulation of antidiuretic hormone. So it will be a proportionate increase in the water absorption and the volume of water in the plasma as compared to the sodium, and that will lead to hyponatremia. And in these cases, the saline infusion doesn't really address the main problem of hyponatremia. Rather, it exacerbates the problem of hyponatremia. So the treatment for SIDH is a fluid restriction, and if this is a severe hyponatremia, then you have to immediate administer 3% NaCl, which we'll see in the treatment part. Clinical symptoms of hyponatremia depends on the severity. It can be even can be due to the time it has taken for the hyponatremia to develop. It can be acute or severe, or it can be chronic. Because normally in the chronic patients, it has been seen that the brain has great capacity to compensate for the chronic deficiency of sodium levels, and there the neurological symptoms are more the more subordinate as compared to in acute hyponatremia, where the symptoms are so subtle. So primary symptoms is neurological, which is due to development of cerebral edema within the rigid skull, and usually it is more pronounced in females, since it has been proposed because of the lesser skull space. And the symptoms are headache, lethargy, it can lead to confusion, and especially in the chronic geriatric cases can lead to gait disorders. And again, a very subtle findings is nausea and vomiting, and even severe hyponatremia can lead to seizure, coma, brain stem herniation, and permanent brain damage. So the hyponatremia has been defined as to be mild as less than 135, moderate less than 130, and severe as less than 120. But this is a very relative clinical symptoms might not correlate with the serum levels. So it's very important to remember that clinical judgment is always more important than the lab values. So a severe hyponatremia or acute hyponatremia with a rapid onset, where the serum level is less than 120, and the hyponatremia has developed over less than a period of 48 hours. And the major complication can be a normocapnic or hypercapnic respiratory failure, which is one very important phenomena in cases of acute and severe hyponatremia. And this normocapnic respiratory failure is a non-cardiogenic type of pulmonary edema with normal capillary wedge pressure. And these causes of acute hyponatremia can be iatrogenic, or post-operative premenopausal women, or hypertonic fluids with causes of increased vasopressin in cases of SIDH. Then glycine irrigation happens in the urethral TURP surgery for the prostate gland. Then uterine surgery also, and colonoscopic preparation, or recent institutes of thiazide. So the thiazide mostly causes chronic hyponatremia rather than the acute hyponatremia. And then can be other multifactorial causes. And then what happens, as we talked about the persistent chronic hyponatremia, there will be brain cells try to adapt for the decrease in intracellular osmolarity and so the excuse me. So the symptoms of vomiting, nausea, subtle gait and cognitive defects, and increased risk of falls and risk of bony fracture, these are more of prominent features. So in cases of hyponatremia, your approach should be history and examination, then assessment of serum osmolality to confirm if the diagnosis is a true hypotonic hyponatremia or hypertonic hyponatremia or pseudo hyponatremia. Then for a true hypertonic hyponatremia, you have to assess for the volume status and urine sodium concentration, and then lab test to assess for the underlying causes of hyponatremia. So you need a detailed history and examination. Again, if there is a vomiting or diarrhea with a hypertonic fluid ingestion, a recent surgery, there is or improper IV fluid administration, there is any associated disease like psychiatric illness or CHF or cirrhosis or renal failure, or recent head injury or intracranial surgery or subarachnoid hemorrhage or a brain abscess, they all can cause SIDH. Then cough or shortness of breath or pleuritic chest pain, this could it can prompt a consideration of respiratory causes of SIDH. And use of certain medication we talked about in stained turgor and mucous membrane appearance and postural hypertension. Then detection of ascites or peripheral edema, pulmonary rails, then measuring blood pressure, JVP, CVP, and pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. Then again, the second step is measuring the plasma osmolality, and then plasma osmolality normal value is 280 to 295. Low plasma osmolality confirms the diagnosis, and normal plasma osmolality, again you have to look for the causes for isotonic pseudohyponatremia. If there is a high plasma osmolality, you should look for the hypertonic hyponatremia, which can be checked on for hypoglycemia mannitol therapy. Step 3 is classified into hypovolemia, hypervolemia, or euvolemia. This is what we talked about. The treatment protocols is absolutely different in all the three categories, and the volume status and the urinary sodium should be assessed in all the three cases. So check urine osmolarity. If urine osmolarity is below 100 milliosmol, it indicates the antidiuretic hormone secretion is completely and appropriately suppressed. And if the osmosis or urine osmolarity is greater than 100 milliosmol, it means there is an impaired water excretion, which reflects impaired renal diluting mechanism. Then urine sodium and urine osmolarity, if it's more than 40 and urine osmolarity more than 150, it's more diagnostic of SIDH or adrenal insufficiency or cerebral salt wasting. A low urine sodium and a high urine osmolarity again can indicate hypovolemia. Low levels of serum uric acid and blood urea favors euvolemia hyponatremia, where the high values of serum uric acid and blood urea favors hypovolemic hyponatremia. So basically you have to get all the blood sugar, creatine, protein, triglyceride, potassium, thyroid function test, adrenal function, acid-base analysis, and even in some cases you might need head CT scan and chest X-rays. So management depends on the cause of hyponatremia. Usually the acute symptomatic hyponatremia has to be addressed, but the correction of sodium is again very important, because a rapid correction of sodium leads to a special entity which is pontine melanosis or the demyelinating melanosis, or which is a very dreadful and a fatal condition, where you will have patient might come to you even after 4 to 5 days of the sodium correction or rapid sodium correction, and the patient comes to you with quadriplegia, and the prognosis is not good, and it is rather it is it speaks about the way the patient has been treated, and it can be a basis for medical legal, even it can form a basis for a medical legal cases. So you have to be very particular as far as the sodium correction is concerned, because the rapid correction can lead to central pontine melanosis, and serum sodium should not be raised more than 8 to 10 milliequivalent in first 24 hours, while chronic asymptomatic hyponatremia can be corrected slowly. So the rate of sodium correction should be around 6 to 8 milliequivalent in 24 hours. And if sodium is less than 20, we have to, if the cause is SIDH, you have to restrict the water intake, and you to administer 3% saline. And if it's because of you might have to give diuretics and oral salt. And once the sodium reaches 120 level, then Vaptan, which is a special drug which acts as the which acts at the collecting debts at the Vaptan receptors or vasopressin receptors, and that can be initiated as soon as the acute management of hyponatremia is over. Then this calculation, I think it again is beyond your scope of knowledge. Let's just skip it. So we should know about the fluid composition, like the amount of sodium in 0.9% NS is 154 milliequivalent per liter, while in 3% NS it contains 513 milliequivalent of serum sodium. So this is being used for uh, cases of hyponatremia, for the acute cases of hyponatremia. And if serum sodium is 120 to 135 in asymptomatic cases, if it's not controlled, then you can use Vaptan. So water restriction is more than enough, or in symptomatic cases you can use water restriction along with Vaptan. But the one thing is very important is always remember the actually the sodium correction, it depends on the type of hyponatremia, or it's a hypovolemia or hypervolemia or a normal volemia. We're talking about the normal volemia correction, and where the use of Vaptans are very helpful, but it can be used in hypervolemic hyponatremia also, and it acts at the at the level of collecting dirt, such as the vasopressin receptors, and it can be used as a outpatient therapy, and maximum it is contraindicated if the patient cannot drink or doesn't feel thirsty, and it can lead to a good quantity of water loss. But important with Vaptans is Vaptan we can't use more than for 1 month. So this is all about sodium correction, and the rest of it depends on the cause of hyponatremia. As we talked about, if it is the cause is hypovolemia or acute fluid loss through GIT or diarrhea or vomiting, then you have to go for the correction of the intravascular deficit. And if it's because of the hypervolemia or the failure, then you have to look for the diuretics and to induce diuresis and try to correct the hypervolemia. So again, it's a last, I will show you the algorithm. You have to, when there is a hyponatremia, you should exclude hyperglycemia and all the other pseudo hyponatremia causes. And if it's acute or severe, you have to assess. If there is an acute, then you have to always consider a hypertonic saline infusion or administration. If it's not, then you have to look for the urine osmolality. If it's greater than 100 or less than 100, and it's less than 100, can be primary polydipsia or low solute intake. Or if it's more than 100, then you look for the urine sodium. If less than 30, and if it's a low effective arterial blood volume, then if ECF expanded, consider heart failure, cirrhosis or nephrotic. And if ECF or extracellular fluid is contracted, then consider either a diuretic use or third space loss or a diarrhea or vomiting. And a patient on diuretics, and if patient is not on diuretics, and if the urine sodium is more than 30, if ECF is contracted, then we talked about the cerebral salt wasting or renal salt wasting or primary adrenal deficiency. And if it's normal, then consider SIDH or secondary adrenal insufficiency, like or hypothyroidism. I hope I'll be able to drive some points about hyponatremia, and this is how you have to address hyponatremia. And if any question you have, do let me know.